In the sun-scorched village of Gubale, where the earth has cracked and the crops have failed, Kwame, a once proud farmer, is now at his breaking point. The once fertile land has turned barren, and the looming threat of starvation is palpable. Kwame's family, including his daughter Bahati, who has always been his light in the darkness, are slowly withering away, their bellies empty and their hopes fading. The village elders, seeing the desperation in his eyes, see an opportunity to gain favor with the wealthier traders. They pressure him, whispering that he needs to make a sacrifice to survive. The offer comes from Mzee Baraka, a wealthy 63-year-old merchant with a reputation for cruelty and darkness. Mzee's wealth could save the village, they claim, and Kwame, trapped between the threat of death and the desperate need to survive, makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Kwame, looking at his daughter Bahati with a heart full of shame and pain, agrees to the unimaginable. He will trade her to Mzee Baraka in exchange for cattle, sacks of grain, and a future of favor within the village. Bahati, only 14, still a child, doesn't fully grasp what is happening. The elders stand by, nodding in approval, as her fate is sealed. Bahati's tears are ignored, her desperate pleas unheard, as her father's hand shakes in silent regret, yet he allows the transaction to go forward. Mzee Baraka, with his cold, calculating eyes, takes Bahati in his grip, and with a few words and a tight handshake, she's given away like a commodity. The village, which once thrived with life, now feels like a cage for Bahati. She is no longer the carefree girl who ran through fields of green, her laughter echoing through the hills. Instead, she is a mere tool for survival, her worth reduced to cattle and grain. Her father, who she once trusted more than anyone, is now a stranger to her, his face turned away from her cries. As Bahati is led away, the weight of betrayal sinks into her heart. She's no longer just a daughter, she is the price of a father's broken dream. But the true cost of this betrayal will only unfold as the winds of fate stir, and Bahati's spirit, though broken, begins to smolder with the fire of vengeance. The cold, harsh deal may have been sealed, but Bahati's journey is just beginning. Bahati's world, once filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of her father's embrace, has turned cold and uncertain. She is no longer in Gubale, the village she had called home. Instead, she is taken to the mansion of Mzee Baraka, a 63-year-old man whose reputation sends shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. His home, perched high above the village, seems as much a fortress as a house. Massive, dark walls surround her, blocking out the sunlight and casting everything in eerie shadows. The air is thick with the scent of old wood and something far darker, something that clings to the very walls of the mansion, as if the house itself is alive with secrets. Bahati's heart races, her mind still reeling from the betrayal of her father. She tries to steady herself, to make sense of the nightmare she's been thrust into. The old man, Mzee Baraka, looks at her with cold, calculating eyes, and his every movement carries an air of menace. His home is filled with strange symbols, ancient artifacts, and items that seem to have come from another world. Twisted masks, dried herbs, and candles that flicker in odd rhythms. The silence in the mansion is almost suffocating, broken only by the whispers she sometimes hears in the halls, too faint to understand, but too clear to ignore. Bahati can't shake the feeling that something is not right here. The house feels like it has its own soul, one that watches, waits, and listens. She's assigned a small, dimly lit room, with nothing but a straw mattress on the cold floor. But even as she lies there, trying to sleep, she feels eyes watching her. Strange shadows seem to shift in the corners of the room, and she hears the soft scurrying of creatures in the walls. Her body is filled with dread, yet her spirit refuses to break. Mzee Baraka might have taken her, but she is not his to control. Her heart is heavy with the weight of her father's betrayal, but her eyes, though filled with tears, burn with a quiet, fierce rage. Bahati has known loss before, but this was something deeper, more crushing than anything she could have imagined. Yet in the darkest corners of her mind, there is a flicker of hope, She knows that she is more than this. She is not just a victim, she is a survivor. As the days drag on, Bahati finds herself constantly alert, every sound setting her nerves on edge. The mansion is full of strange rituals that make her skin crawl. She sees Mzee Baraka performing rituals with his followers, his face twisted in ecstasy as he mutters chants in an ancient tongue. There's a power in his presence, an unnatural force that chills her to the bone. But Bahati remains unmoved. She refuses to bend. She will not become another soul lost in the darkness of this place. The whispers in the mansion grow louder as time passes, almost as if the house itself is speaking to her. She begins to feel the presence of something or someone watching over her. One night, as the full moon rises high in the sky, Bahati sneaks through the dark hallways, drawn to a part of the mansion she's never dared enter. There, hidden away in the attic, she finds strange markings on the floor, symbols that seem to pulse with an energy she cannot understand. As her fingers trace the symbols, a rush of warmth floods her veins. It's as if the house is acknowledging her, recognizing her as something more than just a frightened girl. Bahati suddenly remembers the stories her grandmother used to tell, stories of ancient gods, of powerful spirits, and of women who wielded unimaginable strength. She had always dismissed them as fairy tale, but now, in this dark place, something stirs within her. She feels a connection to something ancient, something powerful, and the fire inside her begins to grow. The anger she's held inside for so long, the pain of her father's betrayal, and the rage at being sold, all of it begins to fuel something deep inside her. In the silence of that attic, under the light of the full moon, Bahati makes a silent vow. She will not break. She will not become another lost soul in Mzee Baraka's twisted world. She is Bahati, more than a girl, more than a victim. And soon, the darkness that surrounds her will meet its match. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now burn with a fire that will not be extinguished. She has found something in this dark mansion, a strength that no one can take from her. The time for survival is over. It's time for vengeance, and Bahati will rise from the ashes, stronger than anyone could ever have imagined. The days in Mzee Baraka's mansion drag on like a never-ending nightmare. The oppressive walls close in around Bahati, as each passing moment brings more torment. She feels the weight of her chains, not just the physical ones that bind her to this place, but the ones wrapped around her heart, suffocating her spirit. The mansion is cold, its rooms too large and too empty, filled with nothing but echoes of her cries and the harsh commands of Baraka's followers. The walls feel like they are closing in on her, and the hopelessness threatens to swallow her whole. Yet, as the days blend together in a haze of exhaustion and despair, something strange begins to happen. Every night, as the moon rises high in the sky and the mansion falls into its eerie silence, Bahati hears it. At first, she thinks it's just the wind, a trick of her tired mind. But then, the voices grow clearer, almost tangible, soft, whispering sound, like the rustle of leaves, calling her name. Bahati, Bahati. The wind carries the whispers, drifting through the cracks in the mansion's old walls, reaching her even in the darkest corners of the house. These voices aren't of the living, they are otherworldly, ancient, and they seem to hold a promise, an unspoken truth that calls to her. They tell her she is more than this, more than the helpless girl trapped in the mansion, more than the daughter betrayed by her father. The whispers grow louder, more insistent, every night. At first, Bahati is terrified. Who could be calling her, and why? But slowly, the fear gives way to curiosity. These voices aren't just calling her name, they are calling her to something greater, something beyond her understanding. Each whisper carries with it a sense of power, a pulse of energy that seems to resonate deep within her soul. There is a strange comfort in them, a feeling that she is not alone in this darkness, that someone or something sees her, understands her pain, and is reaching out to her. One night, the whispers lead her to the garden behind the mansion, a place she had always avoided. It's overgrown and untended, yet in the moonlight, it looks almost magical. The trees sway in rhythm with the whispers, their branches moving like arms, beckoning her closer. As she steps further into the garden, she feels a sudden warmth, as though the earth itself is alive and speaking to her. It is there, standing beneath the tallest tree, that she hears it clearly. You are not forgotten, Bharati. You are the fire, the storm, the strength of your ancestors. Malkia Nuru calls you. Bharati's heart skips a beat. Malkia Nuru. The name is unfamiliar, yet it stirs something deep inside her. Who is this goddess? Why is she calling to her? And how does she know so much about her pain? In that moment, the air around Bharati seems to change. It grows heavier, charged with a force she can't explain. She feels something awakening inside her, something powerful and ancient. The whispers are no longer just voices in the wind. They are the voice of Malkia Nuru, a forgotten goddess of strength, fire, and vengeance, a spirit of the land who had been silenced by time, but is now stirring, calling her to rise. As Bharati drifts into sleep that night, the dreams come. Vivid, powerful visions flood her mind. She sees herself standing tall, flames rising around her, the wind howling and the earth trembling beneath her feet. She feels power, raw, unstoppable power, coursing through her veins. It's as if she has always known it was there, waiting to be awakened. The visions show her a path, one where she is no longer a victim, but a force of nature. She is the flame that burns through the darkness. She is the storm that brings justice. Malkia Nuru's presence wraps around her like a cloak, filling her with strength, with purpose. The voice in her dreams is calm, yet commanding. You are more than what they have made you. You are not their possession. You are a queen, a warrior. You are my child, and it is time for you to rise. It is time for you to reclaim what was stolen. The words sink deep into Bharati's soul, planting seeds of awakening. She wakes the next morning with a newfound fire in her eyes. The weight of her chains, not just physical, but mental and spiritual. The pain she feels is no longer just the ache of betrayal. It is the growing intensity of a storm within her, one that cannot be contained. The chains are still there, but now they feel like they're meant to be broken. The whispers of the goddess, the call of Malkia Nuru, have ignited something deep within Bharati, a spark of defiance, a will to survive, to rise, and to claim her power. She may be trapped in this mansion, but she knows now that this is only the beginning. The real journey is about to start. Rain poured from the heavens like the sky itself was weeping, thunder growling through the night as if the earth had finally grown tired of holding its silence. It was the perfect night for running. Bharati's bare feet pounded against the wet ground as she slipped out of Mzibaraka's mansion, heart racing, lungs burning. She didn't have a plan, only the voices, the whispers that had grown louder each night, calling her, guiding her. She didn't look back. Behind her was pain, chains, and betrayal. Ahead was only darkness, but something inside her told her to keep going. Something deeper than fear, something ancient. She ran through the trees, deeper into the forest than she had ever gone. This was the forbidden part, a place even the elders whispered about with fear. But Bharati wasn't afraid anymore, not of the forest, not of legends, not even of death. Her soaked dress clung to her skin, and the wind howled through the trees like spirits dancing. Then suddenly the forest opened into a clearing, and in the center stood a massive baobab tree, older than anything she'd ever seen. It stretched into the sky like it was trying to touch the stars. Beneath its roots, something shimmered. A strange light pulsed from beneath the earth, drawn to it. Bharati dropped to her knees and dug into the soft, rain-soaked soil. Her fingers brushed something smooth, stone, but warm like skin. She pulled it free, and the moment her hand wrapped around it, everything changed. Her breath caught in her throat. The forest fell silent. The rain seemed to freeze in the air, and her vision blurred. Then came the flood, flashes of fire, women covered in golden armor, warriors with burning eyes and voices that roared like thunder. She saw them running through battlefields, chanting, rising, never falling. She saw herself among them. She wasn't watching anymore. She was inside the vision, standing tall with fire in her hands and storm in her blood. She was no longer the broken girl from Gubalo. She was something else, something powerful, something meant to rise. The stone in her hand pulsed again, and her body reacted. Her hands glowed, not with flames, but with a bright, raw power that felt alive. It danced up her arms into her chest, filling her bones with strength she never knew existed. Bhati gasped, the power overwhelming, but she didn't let go. She held on, even as it felt like the world was splitting open inside her. She screamed, not in fear, but in release, in awakening. Her body trembled, tears mixing with rain, but she smiled. For the first time since her father betrayed her, she smiled. That night, under the ancient tree, Bhati wasn't just a girl anymore. She was reborn. The whispers had led her here. The goddess Malkia Nuru had called her, and now she understood why. The power she felt wasn't new. It had always been inside her, waiting for the right moment, waiting for her to be ready. She stood up slowly, the stone still glowing in her palm, her heart steady. The girl who had been sold was gone. In her place stood something greater, a flame that would not go out. 5 years had passed since the girl named Bhati vanished into the stormy night. Gubale, the village that once sold her for cattle and grain, had moved on, its people busy with new harvests, new leaders, and the same old silence. Kwame, her father, now wore fine clothes and held the respected title of village chief. Mzibaraka, still feared and growing richer, sat like a spider in his mansion, untouched by time. The villagers rarely spoke of the girl who had been traded away. To them, she was a chapter best left closed, a memory buried beneath shame and convenience. But what they didn't know was that the flame they had tried to extinguish had not died. It had grown, and now it was returning. The sky was overcast the day she arrived. The air felt heavy, as if nature itself held its breath. A cloaked stranger walked slowly through the dusty path leading to Gubale, her face hidden beneath a dark hood. No one noticed her at first, just another traveler perhaps. But the animals did. Birds stopped singing, dogs whimpered and backed away. Goats froze mid-step, eyes wide, sensing something beyond human. The winds shifted unnaturally, circling the stranger like a whispering storm. Something had changed in Gubale that day, and it had nothing to do with crops or trade. It was her. Bhati had returned. She moved like the wind, calm, steady, but impossible to ignore. Under the hood, her eyes burned not with anger, but with purpose. Her face had matured, sharpened with time and truth. The soft girl they remembered was gone. In her place stood a woman shaped by pain, molded by power, and strengthened by fire. She walked with no fear, her steps steady and silent. She did not need to announce who she was. Her presence spoke louder than any name. She passed by villagers who looked at her with curiosity, not knowing why their chests tightened or why goosebumps rose on their arms. Children stopped playing and stared. Old women made signs of protection with their hands. The elders felt a chill down their spines, but none could place the reason. Only the land seemed to recognize her. The wind curled around her feet like a faithful companion. Leaves rustled though there was no. The earth itself seemed to hum beneath her steps. She wasn't just walking back into Gubale. She was being carried by something ancient, something that walked with her. Inside her cloak, Bhati carried more than memory. She carried the weight of silence, the rage of betrayal, and the voice of Malkia Nuru whispering through her soul. Her power was no longer just a secret force hidden beneath skin. It was alive in her breath, in her gaze, in every step she took. She had not come back for pity. She had not come for revenge alone. She had come for truth, for justice, for every girl who had ever been silenced and sold. When she finally reached the village square, she stopped and lifted her head. The hood fell back. Gasps echoed around her. Some recognized her instantly. The curve of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. Others stood frozen, sensing something holy, something untouchable. It was her. It was Bhati, but not the Bhati they remembered. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Her return was louder than any speech, heavier than any weapon. In that moment, every crack in Gubale's past started to split open, and deep within the earth, the forgotten spirit stirred. The flame had returned, not to burn everything to ash, but to bring light to what had been hidden. Justice had come home. The sun still rose over Gubal like it always had, but something in the village felt different. The air had changed. What used to be a peaceful breeze now howled through the trees at night, like mourning spirits. People whispered about strange sounds, footsteps in the dark, cries in the wind, and shadows that moved when no one was there. Livestock began disappearing without a trace. Goats found dead in the morning, chickens gone from locked coops. Some blamed wild animals, others whispered of curses. But deep down, they all felt the truth. They had wronged someone, and the past was coming back. Kwame, now the proud chief of the village, walked with a false confidence. His robes were cleaner, his hut grander, but inside, guilt gnawed at him like rats in the walls. He saw the signs but refused to speak of them. At meetings, his voice shook slightly. At night, he drank more, trying to silence the echo of his daughter's name in his head. He had convinced himself that he had done what he had to do, but even he could not deny that something was wrong. The winds carried her name. Bahati, Mzee Baraka, older now but still powerful, had expanded his trade routes. He controlled goods, money, even people. But even his mansion, once the tallest and strongest in Gubale, felt cold and unsteady. Fires refused to stay lit. Walls creaked with no wind. Servants whispered of a woman's voice in the halls, soft but strong, calling out from nowhere. Baraka laughed it off during the day, but at night, he kept his doors locked and his sword nearby. His dreams were no longer peaceful. They were filled with fire, chain, and eyes that glowed in the dark. And through it all, Bahati watched. Hidden beneath her cloak, she walked the forests and hills, always near but never seen. She had not yet spoken a word, but her silence was louder than thunder. Her presence stirred more than just fear. It awakened memories. Guilt sat heavy in the hearts of the elders, who had once nodded silently as she was traded away. Mothers pulled their daughters close. Children, too young to remember her story, drew pictures of a woman with fire in her hands. The village grew restless. Meetings were called. Rituals were performed. But nothing stopped the feeling that the storm had already begun. Crops began to wither. Wells ran dry. The land, once fertile, now felt cursed. But it wasn't nature turning against them. It was justice rising. Bahati didn't rush. She let the fear spread, let the silence speak for her. Every rotting tree, every missing animal, every sleepless night, they were warnings, gentle compared to what was coming. She didn't come back just to punish. She came to make them see. She wanted them to remember what they had done, to feel what she had felt, to understand that she had survived, and she was no longer the victim. She was the storm, and it had only just begun. The reckoning had begun, but it wasn't loud. There were no cries for justice, no cries for revenge. Bahati's revenge came in whispers, in shadows, in the way the earth seemed to turn against those who had wronged her. She was the storm, but the storm did not strike all at once. It came in waves, slow and steady, until nothing could withstand it. One by one, they fell. It started with the elder who had blessed her trade. He was the first to speak those fateful words in the village council, the one who had nodded in approval when her father had sold her. He had seen it as a practical deal, a way to secure the future of the village. But now he lay writhing in his bed, burning with fever. His body was ravaged by an illness that no one could diagnose. The healers were baffled. It didn't make sense. But Bahati knew it was her doing. The ancient fire of her bloodline had set the curse in motion. Her power wasn't a blade. It wasn't physical violence. It was the very land around them, and it was coming for those who had turned their backs on her. Next was a mother, one of the village women who had quietly watched her fate unfold, too afraid to speak out. She had never raised a voice against the deal, had never stepped forward to say that what was happening was wrong. Now the consequences of her silence were being felt. One morning, she woke up, only to find that she had lost the ability to speak. Her throat was completely paralyzed. She couldn't even utter a sound. The village rushed to her side, but no one could help her. Her silence had caught up with her, and Bahati's power was the price she paid. There was no need for Bahati to strike a single blow. The woman's own silence, the very silence she had used to ignore Bahati's suffering, had turned against her. Then, the crops began to rot. Mzee Baraka had been proud of his lands. His fields of maize and millet were the envy of every village around. He controlled the trade routes and was rich beyond measure. But in one terrible night, it all changed. His crops blackened, the plants withering into twisted, dry husks. The fields were ruined, barren, and dead. The village blamed a strange disease, a sickness they couldn't explain, but Bahati knew better. It was the power of nature, the same fire that burned in her blood, claiming what was rightfully hers. No weapons, no battles, just the land, fighting back. The villagers whispered of curses, but no one dared speak her name. They all knew who was behind it, even if they didn't say it aloud. Bahati had not needed to wield a sword. Her presence alone had ignited the power of the earth, the wind, the very fire that ran through her veins. And one by one, the people who had once turned their backs on her were falling, consumed by their own guilt and the ancient wrath she carried. The village trembled, knowing that it wasn't over yet. Bahati wasn't just seeking vengeance. She was bringing balance, and with every soul that faltered, she became stronger. The storm within her building, her silent reckoning was just beginning. The flames of her ancestors were rising, and they would burn until every wrong had been righted. The air in Gubale had turned thick with fear. Whispers spread like wildfire through the village. The cursed girl is back. The old stories were being retold, and with every word, the tension grew. The people who once ignored Bahati's suffering, who had turned a blind eye to her pain, now trembled at the thought of facing her again. The wind carried her name, and it seemed the earth itself trembled beneath her feet. The villagers, once so sure of their power, were now the ones who feared the darkness they had helped create. The villagers who had once been too proud, too comfortable to care, began to panic. They gathered in secret, speaking in hushed tones, trying to figure out what to do. Some offered gifts in an attempt to appease her, hoping to buy their forgiveness with sacks of grain, fine jewelry, or livestock. Others sang the old songs, the songs they had sung to honor the spirits, hoping that the melodies would soothe whatever curse had been unleashed. But Bahati wasn't fooled by their desperate acts. She wasn't interested in gifts. She wasn't interested in apologies. She wanted the truth. Bahati had returned, not to let them apologize and walk away as if nothing had happened. She had returned to make them face the consequences of their actions, to make them confess the part they had played in her suffering. She wanted them to acknowledge their silence, their cruelty, their betrayal. No amount of gold or livestock could ever erase the pain they had caused her. She wanted their confessions, raw, honest, and full of the guilt that had eaten at them for so long. And above all, she wanted justice, the same justice that had been denied to her for so long. Her presence was a constant reminder of the scars they had all tried to forget. She walked through the village, her eyes fierce, her silence more powerful than any words could have been. The villagers could not escape her gaze. They could not hide from the truth anymore. No matter how much they pleaded, no matter how many gifts they piled at her feet, Bahati wouldn't relent. She wasn't here for forgiveness. She was here to make them face what they had done and to make them feel the weight of their guilt. Gubale trembled, but this time it wasn't the wind or the storms. It was the truth, rising from the ashes of the past. And Bahati wasn't leaving until every single one of them had confessed. The door creaked open, and Bahati stepped into the place she had once called home. The familiar scent of her father's cooking, the warmth of the hearth, it all felt so distant now. This house, once full of memories, now felt like a tomb, silent and heavy with guilt. There, in the middle of the room, stood Kwame, her father, now the proud village chief. But today, he wasn't the man in charge. Today, he was a broken shell of the man who had once made the decision that had ruined everything. Kwame froze when he saw her, his face paled, eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. The girl he had sold, the daughter he had traded for a handful of cattle and grain, stood before him, no longer a helpless child, but a powerful force that made the air feel thick and charged. He had never expected this, never imagined that the broken girl he abandoned would return as the woman standing in front of him. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands trembled at his sides, his chest heaving with the weight of shame. Bahati didn't move, didn't flinch. Her eyes burned like the embers of a fire that had never gone out. She had no need to raise her voice. She didn't need to scream to make him feel the pain of what he had done. Her words were quiet, but they hit like a lightning bolt. "You traded me for grain," she said, her voice calm but ice cold. "Now reap what you sow." Kwame's eyes welled up. His knees buckled beneath him, and he fell to the ground, crumbling into a heap of shame. The proud chief was no longer standing tall. He was a broken man, begging for forgiveness, pleading for a chance to make things right. But Bahati wasn't interested in his pleas. She had lived with his betrayal for far too long to be swayed by his tears. His remorse wasn't enough to undo the years of suffering she had endured. She had survived, and she wasn't here for his forgiveness. She was here for justice. Kwame's weeping wasn't from the anger in her eyes. It wasn't from the fire that blazed within her. It was from the crushing weight of his own guilt. He could no longer escape the truth that she had always known. The pain he had caused her had returned, and now it was his turn to feel the consequences. And as he sobbed, Bahati stood tall, her gaze never leaving him. This was her moment, not for revenge, but for closure. And in her silence, she showed him the power of what she had become. Bahati stood in the center of the village, not as a force of destruction, but as a symbol of something greater, something that Gubale had lost and now desperately needed. The winds that once howled with fear now whispered with change, as Bahati's presence filled the air with a kind of power that was impossible to ignore. She was no longer the girl who had been sold for grain. She was no longer the victim of betrayal. She had become something else, something that the villagers couldn't quite understand, but felt deep in their bones. As she stood before the crowd, Bahati didn't seek to punish or break. Instead, she sought to heal. The land had been scarred by years of neglect and guilt, but with her touch, it began to respond. The crops that had once withered under a curse now began to sprout. The earth seemed to sigh with relief, welcoming her power, as if it too had been waiting for this moment. The trees that had been barren started to bloom. The soil, once dry and cracked, softened and became fertile once again. Bahati wasn't just healing the land. She was healing the wounds that had run deep within the hearts of the villagers. She turned to the girls in the village, the ones who had been taught to keep quiet, to bend to the will of others, the ones who had been raised to believe their voices didn't matter. Bahati spoke to them not with anger, but with a fire that burned for them. She taught them that they too had power, that their voices could change the world. She told them stories of the goddess, Malkia Nuru, whose name she spoke aloud once more, breathing life into it after years of silence. The goddess had once been forgotten, her power buried beneath the weight of fear, but now, with Bahati's words, her spirit was alive again, guiding and empowering those who had been silenced for too long, and the village began to change. The fear that had once gripped their hearts faded like mist in the morning sun. Where there had been silence, there was now song, the laughter of children, the chatter of women, the voices of the oppressed rising in unity. The men who had once cowered in guilt began to work side by side with the women, rebuilding what had been broken. There was no longer a divide. There was only the promise of a future where everyone had a voice, where every girl could stand tall and proud, just like Bahati had. In the end, it wasn't the destruction of Gubale that Bahati sought. It was its transformation. From the fire of her pain, she had forged a freedom that no one could take away. She had shown them that true power wasn't in fear, it wasn't in silence, it was in truth, in justice, and in the strength to rise again. And as she stood there, watching the village slowly heal and grow, Bahati knew one thing for sure. She had not just changed Gubale, she had set it free.